Welcome to this SSE Alumni webinar on the topic of sustainable fashion, where we all learn about what fosters and challenges the creation of sustainable clothing. My name is Maria Weimar, and I work at the Alumni office here at the Stockholm School of Economics. Some housekeeping rules. Due to the number of participants, we have muted you, but feel free to submit any questions you have in the chat. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. Also, we are recording the webinar, so it will be made available afterwards. We have a full program today, and I'm very much looking forward to listening to both SSE faculty and our industry experts from the SSE alumni community discuss this very interesting and highly relevant topic. So to kick off this webinar, I would first like to give the word to our moderator, Professor Susanne Sweet, who is also Research Director at Center of Sustainability Research. Welcome.
Thank you, Maria. And all of you, welcome to this seminar. And also to just clarify, we will have also questions during the seminar. So please send questions whenever you have it in the chat to Maria, and I will ask her now and then for your questions. So very welcome here. And Maria already said something about me. I'm here at Stockholm School of Economics and Research Director at Center for Sustainability Research. And I have been researching sustainability for the last 30 years and sustainable fashion for the last 11. So something I know about the topic, which is good. And with me to discuss sustainable fashion, I have a very prominent panel of experts in this. And here in the studio, I have with me Patrik Lundström from Renewcell, who basically makes clothes out of your used clothes or make textile fibers for to make new clothes of used clothes. So, and then to my left, Malin Wennberg, PhD student at Stockholm University, also been working with in Mr. Future Fashion research program earlier, where you were the communication manager, and now PhD student. Yes. On the topic, I would assume. And also an advisor in fashion, and she is also the fashionista in the group, making her own clothes and things. So, great person. And with me from Hong Kong, I have Caroline Brigert. Hi, Caroline. Hope it's not too late for you there. And Caroline is an SSE alum, also like Patrik, who has been here at SSE before, and working as an independent sustainability advisor at Hop Loom in Hong Kong. And you might not know it, but you probably have had some of their clothes close to your body more intimate than you know, because they make underwear and really fashionable lingerie and swimwear. So the likelihood is good that you, even if I was actually new to the name, Caroline. And then we have another SSE alum, Martin Svensson. He's an associate at H&M Collab. And Collab invests in sustainability solutions, technology, and entrepreneurs to push forward these questions in the industry. So that's a group we have at our resource here. And I'm just gonna, before I let them in, speak briefly about the challenges of this industry if there is someone who is new to the industry. And the textile and fashion industry is very interesting because it's very old, and many countries around the globe has been basically living out of or creating wealth in their countries due to this industry. Started with spinning industry in Great Britain in the late 1700s, moved to the US as well, and now has been I would say, a main responsibility for the phenomenal economic growth that happens in China and Asia. So important industry, and it's also a very sizable market that is steadily growing. Our consumption of clothes and textiles are the global sales of clothing units has more than doubled in the 2000 to 2015. So it's growing quite fast. And 2050, it's over 100 billion units were sold to the consumer markets. It's dominated by, I would say, in the on the consumption side, by Western Europe, US, but as a single market, China is the biggest one now. So fastly growing in other countries as well. So great for business, right? But you might ask yourselves, why on earth are we talking sustainable fashion? Yeah, well, the apparel sector is also creating a lot of environmental and social impact around the globe. And it's the third main source of global carbon emissions, according to statistics from 2020, and representing close to 10% of the total emissions. And according to life cycle analysis that we did in the Mr. Future Fashion program, 80% of the climate impact occur in the production phase of clothes. So not so much us washing our clothes or so, but in the production phase. And that also holds true for other environmental impacts like chemical use and water use. Another issue is the number of discarded and unsold clothes that create a lot of waste. And we use our clothes fewer and fewer times that we buy as consumers. And an average Swede discard around 8 kilos per year in the waste bin. And that's even higher in the Western Europe side. And today, in spite of all the collection that some brands are doing in their stores and also trials to increase the secondhand market, we still have not solved it. Most ends up in landfills, or in low-income countries, landfills, and are burned. And the collection and recycling systems are sort of lagging yet to take care of this waste challenge that we have. And new technologies and business models to scale reuse and recycling are not yet implemented on a larger scale. Consumer acceptance and also engagement into new business models and new ways of doing or consuming clothing are also slow to happen. And policies are not yet in place, although some are coming, and to a more resource efficient consumption and production. So, and in addition, the apparel sector also has great difficulties to solve some of the social challenges happening in mostly production countries or low-income production countries with working conditions, below living wages, etc. So, and finally, and my husband asked me actually to add this. Colonialization continues. Bad. So finally, the Earth's growing population. Well, in my lifetime, it has doubled. And so from 1970, we were 3.7 billion people on the planet, and now we're approaching 8. And the fertile land use will be sort of become more and more competitive in terms of putting your hands on. Should we grow food, forest, or textile fiber, or also hosting people and for the growing cities around the world. So, as you understand, plenty sustainability challenges to address, but they can also be turned into opportunities. We can solve this tomorrow. We can stop using and wearing clothes, but that's not what we want, right? And that's why we need to be smarter. And that's why we're having this seminar, and to discuss with you, experts here in the panel, so how do we do this? How do we become smarter? So let's hear from our experts in the panel. So if I start with you, Patrick, maybe you can do a short introduction and say something about what are you passionate about in addressing these challenges?
Well, for us and for me, it's to make fashion circular. That we actually can use clothes. We should use clothes, of course, longer, but also we should use secondhand when we don't want them. But eventually they end up in the landfill, and then take them back and make new fibers and new textiles out of it. My perspective is basically this: we cannot keep on pumping up oil, growing cotton fibers, and just running it through the value chain one time and then burning it in the end. We need to create circularity, and that's actually not only for the fashion industry. It goes to all product segments. So in general terms, I think we have what I also like to mention, and we talked about a little bit earlier, sustainability and sustain tech is probably one of the best, most fantastic business opportunities that mankind have ever seen. So, I mean, I look very positive towards that we can do this, and sustain tech is now gaining momentum. Politicians are falling a little bit behind, but hopefully they can pick up. But the industry is ready. I mean, we have technologies in order to make the world sustainable within 10 years. But there's a lot of investments that need to come, and there's a lot of system that needs to be turned around.
Great, thank you. Maybe I can turn to Martin. Martin, you are an investor. What do you feel, also about what Patrick was saying around we need a lot of investments here? Technology.
Yeah, I think yeah. Hi everyone. But yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, a lot of we've set up a lot of targets for 2025, 2030, and in order to get there, I mean, we need to start acting now. We need to support innovation and kind of change the system. And as Patrick said, I mean, moving from a linear system to a circular kind of involves not only the production side of things, but also collection and sorting and kind of enabling that circular loop to happen through kind of bringing stakeholders together. And in order for all these pieces to come together, I think, we need to start invest and support these initiatives very hands-on and support them all the way. And that's what we are trying to do at H&M Collab, where we are investing in innovators bringing these technologies to markets and trying to scale them.
Yeah, great. Caroline Hoplund, so can you tell us a little bit about the company and also what you were working on there?
Of course. So Hoplund might not really be a household name, but we are one of the biggest manufacturing groups for lingerie and swimwear. So we own and operate 15 factories, primarily in Bangladesh and Indonesia, in China, and now also in Ethiopia. So this is the very labor intensive part of the value chain, right? So we have a little over 33,000 employees, and we do the processes from cutting the fabric, sewing it into products, and then packing it and shipping it to our customers. So customers include H&M and Marks and Spencer and Target and Victoria's Secret, etc.
Yeah.
And just maybe what I'm passionate about then. So of course, moving towards a circular economy. This is a massive challenge, but very, very important. But I would also like maybe just to add that for me personally, as I have been working with the factories, just seeing how we can empower people in our factories is very, very rewarding, especially as we're employing 84% women, and just seeing how we can have a positive impact in their lives is something I'm very passionate about.
Great, thank you, Caroline. So moving over then to Molly.
So I'm a PhD student at Stockholm University, another university, but my focus is really the market of sustainable fashion. I mean, you talked about all these challenges in fashion and the fashion industry. And what I am trying to look at is just how all these parts are connected and shaping this market. So I'm actually fashion study girl, I say. So it's really about psychology behind fashion and how do we all contribute and really what's the consumer role in all of this. So I'm hoping to bring some of that into this panel.
Yes. So now when you know a little bit about the panel, please, audience, send in questions. Just and some of you have already done so beforehand when you registered, I saw. So great thing. And we will come back to you. So I will just start with you, Patrick. We know that fashion has a large impact. We've talked about that. And the industry is also projected to grow quite a bit. So from 110 million tons of fibers now to 160 million tons per year until 2030. So that's a massive growth. And at the same time, EU and Sweden have also proposed legislation that makes it mandatory for us to collect. And so we will sort of collecting textiles. That's one part of a puzzle here in making circularity, as you were talking about. And many fashion brands have already also committed to do this and are already doing it in their stores, etc. And in your view then, is it at all possible to make fashion sustainable? And if so, what do we need to do to make the industry or the industrial system more sustainable?
Yeah, first and foremost, maybe I should just explain what we're doing at RenewCell. We take in cellulosic-rich clothes, which is either viscose or cotton clothes, and we make a dissolving pulp. And out of that dissolving pulp, you can use that for making new viscose fibers. And our viscose fibers we call circulose. And in that way, we create circularity in the collection and value chains of the fibers, of course, producing new clothes. And we have actually launched with Levi's and H&M, and H&M collab. Martin, you guys have invested in us to support us fantastically. Actually, these jeans I have on here, it's the iconic Levi's 501s. There are 40% circulose fibers in them. So we have replaced 40% of cotton here. So the industry, as you say, is growing from 110 to 160 million tons during this decade, which is actually one part is that we actually using clothes less, which is not good. The good part of that is that there's a lot of poor people coming into middle class. That is what's driving this growth, really. So we're going from about 3.4, 3.5 billion people in middle class to above 5 billion people. It's 1.7 billion people coming into middle class, and they want to dress themselves, just as us, which is fantastic. But that is also creating all these problems that we talk about. So back to your question, yes, I think it's possible to do, but we need to start with design for circularity. It starts at the design phase, really. When we're using polycotton and all these different type of materials, and we use polyesters in one part of the clothes, and then we have, let's say, wool in another, and so forth. These clothes are very, very difficult to collect and do something with in the long run. So all that is going to landfill and being burnt. So if we start there with let's say, these jeans, they are made for circularity. So this is a program that we run with Levi's. We have also done programs together with H&M. So with that, I think we have technologies to do circularity. So the technologies are there. Renewcell is one of those technologies, and there are other companies out there as well, but we start with design. The other part I think is also important is that we create those collection systems. And here there's room for fantastic businesses in developing countries, but we need to be very careful with child labor and slave-like labors and so forth. But I'm willing to, in Renewcell's name, support good entrepreneurs that actually create those businesses and create good jobs in the long run. So I think we have a fantastic opportunity to do all this. However, what is the challenge to do that, which is the second part of your question? Massive, massive investments. For us to build, let's say, 1 million tons this decade is a huge undertaking. We're building now 60,000 metric tons at an old paper mill in Ortviken outside of Sundsvall. And we're expanding that already now because we sold out even before we started the plant, up to 120,000 metric tons. So for us to go to 1 million tons throughout this decade requires a lot of investments, which we have investors that want to do this, and the money is there. But we also need fashion brands to also commit to the volumes. Give us offtake agreements. If you look at what's happening with the most shining star of an example is Northvolt. I mean, they're investing probably up to 100 billion now. Now 74 billion they have invested. They're worth about 100 billion. And the reason they can get those investments is that they have commitments from the car industry. We need to do the same in the fashion industry to get the commitments from the brands. And then we can actually scale this up quite a lot. But of course, there's a massive undertaking. There's a lot of steel in the ground, as we call it in the industry, building plants to create that. And in that, we also need to use circularity as a leading star. We're using an old paper mill, so we're not using a greenfield and can reuse a paper mill. It was actually in Dagens Industri today how we're reusing buildings as well. I find that fantastic. And this circularity mindset, I think, is something that we need to start working on. You know, sustainability is the biggest opportunity that we've seen in mankind. It's bigger than the Industrial Revolution that you talked about in the 70s when we started having those automatic weaving systems and so forth. So I see the whole industry as in a very positive light, and we're getting there, and we're getting a lot of attentions, companies like us and others. So there is an opportunity to solve this.
So, and of course, maybe Maria, we have a question that links to this about technology investing in circularity.
Yes,
Is there anyone?
we do already. For example, there's one. Sorry, it scrolls up and down. So I'm a Brazilian-Swedish designer, and at the moment living in Portugal, doing my master's thesis. And sorry, I scrolled away. So this person is asking, master thesis in design. My thesis is a sustainable project using goldfish leather, a byproduct industry. And here in Portugal, the country absorbs 70% of Norwegian production, but they discard it. My intention is to use them to produce accessories and resolve part of the fast fashion industry. How is it seen by the experts?
So this is he's absorbing recycled material. Was that
fish skin?
Goldfish
fish?
leather.
All right. Yes. So using biological material that is now treated as waste, and this was fish skin.
Yes.
And making in. So, well, I guess the fashion company here, we have Caroline thinking about alternative materials and sustainability.
Well, I think this can be quite technical, so I'm sure also Patrick and Martin will be well placed to answer this. But from my perspective, I think the challenge is when you're having synthetic fibers mixed with biological fibers, and it's very difficult to take those apart and have sort of clean streams of fibers, right? Because ideally you want to have pure cotton going into something else that is pure cotton. But I think the Circulose team is probably even better placed at replying to this question.
As Caroline is talking about, as long as you use biodegradable sewing, let's say threads, when you're making the assessments that you have or your products, then I think you're absolutely right. What you also need to look into is that your end product, the fish skin, in the end is biodegradable. But when it is biodegradable, it actually helps a lot. If it ends up in nature, it actually degrades. What would be even one step further would be if you could recycle that. So when I'm looking at systems, I always think about first and foremost, design for circularity. Secondly, is it biodegradable? And thirdly, can you recycle it? So those are the kind of measures I'm looking at when I'm looking at products.
Yeah, a very good point. And also we can maybe send through that we also found in the research that we did that it's extremely important to think about this from the very beginning when you design the products, because it's not necessarily sustainable because you make it into a circular product. You need to do the analysis through all the steps. So that's very important. So thank you for that. Also, we can come back to all of this. I want to also move over to you, Caroline, again. So we heard from Patrick that the need to make fashion sustainable, but it also involves, of course, this whole supply chain. And you have been working very closely with them. And you are at the epicenter of manufacturing. And we know in the textile industry, extremely complex with many tiers of suppliers and very hard to track basically sometimes. So what would you say about how far the integration of sustainability into practices in the factories have come so far?
Yeah, well, I think we have a long way to go still. But I think you're right. It's not only about what goes into the product, it's also how the product is being made, right? Because throughout the process, there are a lot of chemicals that might not end up in the end product, but that are used in the processes, right? So I think Hopland would be a tier 1 supplier, right? So this is like the final step before it's shipped to customers and stores and bought by end consumers. But I think this industry has been very opaque and it's very complex. It's not like we have a perfectly vertical supply chain where a product is just moving from one organization to the other. It's really an industry that is full of subcontractors, of agents, of different outsourced processes that might be dyeing or washing or embroidery. So just like traceability and transparency of the supply chain is really a big challenge. And I think from our perspective, we have seen, so when I first joined Hopland 3.5 years ago, we talked a lot about compliance and it was quite driven by customers and very reliant on audits. But what we're seeing now is that, the industry is maturing and we as a more advanced tier 1 supplier, we are now taking responsibility for the tier 2 suppliers and suppliers further upstream. So this, I think, is very important to do by having the right business incentives in place so that, we can incentivize our suppliers that are performing well with more business, and that we also have the business leverage to phase out suppliers who are not meeting our standards. Because it's only when we have full transparency and we can also leverage a business incentive when we can secure sustainable change.
What would a business incentive look like? If you can elaborate?
Well, I think it's more business, right? So we want to make sure that, so we have over 500 suppliers, and we have looked at 60 strategic suppliers making up 80% of our purchasing volume to work very closely with them. And we're trying to set long-term expectations so that they also have a fair chance of adjusting their business models. But then we expect them to improve every year, right? Both on the social side of sustainability and the environmental side of sustainability. And it's very important then that we can give them more business if they are performing well. And the suppliers who are neglecting sustainability, we probably don't want to do as much business with them. So just as we're looking at price, lead time, quality, it's also important for us to integrate sustainability into the business decisions.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions regarding supply chains? And
we have also a direct question to Caroline, and was one of the first ones. How do you measure the impact of fashion industry on the women employed in the factories, and in which countries you have the factories?
Sorry, what was the last one? And which challenges?
And in which countries do you have the factories?
So we have factories in Bangladesh, in China, Indonesia, and Ethiopia. So I would say it's very important for us to measure, first of all, how many women do we have in supervisory and managerial positions, because we know that it's a pretty steep drop. If we have 88% women as operators, so people are actually doing the sewing, then I think today we're at 45% women in supervisory positions. So I think this is something that is easy to track, and we need to make sure that we can equip sewers or operators with the necessary soft skills and technical skills so that they can also advance in their careers. So I think just setting hard metrics on women in supervisory positions. But then we have also spent a lot of time looking at the topic of living wages. So I'm sure all of you have heard living wages in the apparel industry. It's a hot topic. So we have spent a lot of time really trying to understand what is the cost of living, and how can we then make sure that everyone working at Hoplon, all the salary earners at Hoplon, have a take-home pay that is meeting a living wage standard or exceeding a living wage standard, so that they can support themselves and their families living a decent life, and also have a little bit of a budget for saving every month. So this is also something that I think feeds into women empowerment and worker empowerment in general, to just make sure that we pay them well and we treat them well. And then lastly, we have a lot of small initiatives that are sort of being developed more organically. So one of my favorite initiatives is a project in Bangladesh, where we're co-creating period panties together with our workers. Because as a manufacturing group of lingerie, I think we have a lot of experience. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of cultural stigma around periods in a country like Bangladesh, both in terms of talking about it from a health aspect, but also in terms of like, how do you clean blood? Because it's also something that is a bit of a cultural taboo. So, you know, working and inviting our workers to develop a product that everyone felt really excited about, that is both comfortable, it serves a purpose, and it's also more sustainable because it creates less plastic waste, and seeing like what the uptake has been in our factories and how well received this has been, that has also been very rewarding, and you know, it's an example of a KPI.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much, Caroline, for those insights. So both a lot of social challenges as well as environmental challenges that you are also working with at Hoplon. Interesting. Another actor, you could say, very important to also participate and engage in sustainable fashion is, of course, the consumer.
It is.
So many are emphasizing the role of the consumer, but if you look at it, how can they sort of impact the sustainable fashion system is a question. So what do we know regarding their engagement and what they are doing and capable of doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important to view this whole system as just that, a system. We've been talking about circular economy, we talk about better supply chain, which is super important, of course. But say we create that very super sustainable garment, but then it's used one time. That's not sustainable. So we need to make sure that also that next part, the consumer, is on board. So what is created, what is produced with better fiber or with better techniques and better social conditions is also used by the consumer. And we do have new business models for this. We do see rent or libraries, secondhand is really taking off. However, we're not seeing a decrease in purchases of newly produced goods. And now I'm talking about statistics for Sweden here. But it is interesting to see these new businesses. At the same time, we're not really seeing them succeed all the way yet. I know we just had a few of those rental services that actually had to shut down their business because consumers were not engaging enough. And I'm not saying it's the consumer's fault here. Absolutely not. What I'm saying is we need to view it from a systemic perspective. Doesn't matter how sustainable the product is or how sustainable the business model is. If we're not engaging, if we're not using, if customers are not participating, it's not sustainable.
We also, in the research program that we were both part of, we also saw that even if we try to engage them quite a bit, it needed a lot. Information is
Definitely
not enough.
no. I mean, we do want to give information, of course. I myself worked for the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency in doing just that, informing Swedish consumers on the climate impact from clothing. However, in the research, we did see that information is not enough if we want to reach actual consumer behavior change. We need more than just information in this case. So their policies obviously come into play, and we need to make sure that what is available to the consumer is always a better choice. They shouldn't have to make the choice between good or bad. The only choice should be good.
Can I add on to that?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, if, again, I'm a little bit positive. We see that we want to eat sustainably. We want to transport ourselves sustainably. We want to build our buildings sustainably. We also want to clothe ourselves sustainably. And we see the uprise of secondhand. The problem is that we don't have any sustainable technologies when it comes to new clothing. Not even better cotton initiatives. Organic cotton is a little bit better, but it's not good. Polyesters and so forth, even if you recycle it, it's still ending out as polyesters, creating all these microfibers and so forth, and had degradation time of 80 years. So I think it's also very difficult for consumers to understand what is sustainable. And here I think we all, as an industry, we need to be very, very careful with greenwashing. And we need to create systems and marking. I have a vision that we would have a green tag for all the textiles that have designed for circularity that actually can be circular. Today we have the fashion industry there's tags out there saying recyclable, but it's not designed. I mean, recyclable, what does that? It doesn't mean anything. That's greenwashing. So we need to be very careful. We're also using tracking or implementing tracking systems. So we will be able to go out in the stores and if somebody's saying, well, they're using circulose in there, we can actually see how much actually has been in there. Because if we're getting too many systems and markings and, here in Sweden, we have Svanen, we have all these, a bunch load of different markings on food. And in the end, it's supporting those companies making the markings. We need one that supports the whole industry. It has to be regulated. And that's where I'm seeing that the politicians, they need to step up. Because otherwise we're going to get into the consumers. And I think the problem we're having with consumers today is that it's so difficult. Is it Svanen? Is it this marking? Is it that marking? And in the end, we need to create something that consumers can trust because they want to. everybody would like to become sustainable. And I foresee that we have flying shame, right? We have everybody wants to have a sustainable house and so forth. I foresee that we're going to be on a dinner together with Susanne and Malin. You guys will be sitting in sustainable blouses in your cases, and I will be sitting in a cotton shirt, and I will be ashamed in 5 to 10 years from now. So, I mean, the movement is there. We just have to be extremely careful that we don't damage the trust that we're actually building up for consumers.
Yeah, and labeling is also not enough. We have it took the food industry here and Krav more than 30 years to really reach over 10% of sales of their. So it takes quite a bit of investment to both convince consumers, but also the really so well spread, and it's the amount of products available with that label that really has played a role.
And different labels.
Yes, there's lots of different labels and lots of confusion, and building trust takes also a long time, and that's what we have seen here, that there are some that have worked very hard to create that trust. And so independent labels, of course, is very important. So jumping just back a little bit to Caroline, are you tagging your clothes somehow? I mean, we are expecting now that soon maybe we will have passports for each clothing.
Yes, so we're using, whenever we're claiming that we're having more sustainable materials, we are using the industry standards like GRS and RCS or GOTS for cotton. But I think, you know, are those materials really sustainable? And I think the new initiative from the European Commission really asks a good question. Like, if we break a closed loop system of PET bottles and start taking PET plastics to make fiber, is that really sustainable? Probably it's not, right? Because what we want in the end of the day, if we're moving towards a circular economy, is to have garment to garment recycling and fiber to fiber. So personally, I'm actually questioning these certifications that we have on the market today. So even, yes, if they are recycled polyester from PET bottles, but is that really what we want a sustainable garment to be? You know, and actually these certificates, it can be as low as like 5% of the fiber is coming from recycled sources. So again, I think the whole industry has a lot of challenges related to greenwashing.
Absolutely. Maria, do you have any questions regarding the consumers and consumer role or consumption?
Yes, we do. For example, how can we really solve the paradox between large companies that want to increase sales and keep prices low and need to consume less? Can investments in green technology, sorry, it keeps scrolling back, really bridge that gap?
Great question. Maybe I can let Martin in for a second here. Investments. So can investments in green technology really solve this conflict basically between selling more products and working with sustainable technologies? How do you sort of suggest or think when you
I think I'd catch to most of the question, but I think so. I mean, when we do investments looking into new technologies for recycling fibers or producing fibers from other sources, I mean, what we look for is truly scalable solutions that will be in parity when it comes to quality, and at scale will reach kind of parity with conventional materials, and we are seeing a lot of those innovations. They're still kind of early on, and it takes time kind of going from discovering a new solution at the lab scale to building these plants and scaling, and a lot of collaborative efforts for the industry. But I truly think that, I mean, with scale, a lot of these more sustainable solutions or fibers or production technologies will kind of overtake the conventional ones, because they will be, at parity when it comes to quality and price, but they need to reach scale essentially. But that's very important when we look for solutions, because I mean, you are the researchers, but there's some, indications that some customers are willing to pay more for sustainable products, but I'm not sure about kind of the masses and kind of where that trade-off comes from kind of the customer perspective.
So basically a lot of it's a lot of experiments going on in the fashion industry, of course, and we are also measuring looking at consumers and how accepting they are, and sometimes companies like H&M that doesn't feel rewarded by the consumers. We know that in terms of that they're opting for that, but also we need a lot more to engage with the customers or consumers, because they are not that knowledgeable. When we really, they need also a lot of rewards, a lot of not information, but engaging for real feedback on their behavior, etc. So there is quite workable things that needs to be done, and very expensive to actually move the masses.
On just that, Carolina mentioned or you did too, the possible of a product passport. So the policy proposed say that each product should then have a greater transparency. The consumer should be able to know where the product comes from and what's inside the product. We're talking about fibers, but possibly even more than actually about the chemicals and the greenhouse gas emission. However, I don't think we can expect the consumer to make the judgment call. They get the information. They can see that, okay, so it's this fiber, it's this chemical, it's this country. What do I do with this information? I mean, it's great that we can increase transparency. We do need more transparency, especially if we're looking at the social questions. However, the judgment call cannot be left to the consumer. I mean, I do research on this daily. This is my life. So yeah, I can do that judgment call, possibly. But I say possibly because it's such a complex question. And then we can't expect, say, a mother going into a store, picking up a pair of pants. It's going to take, 3 minutes for her to do that judgment call? She can't be expected to know everything about all the parts in the supply chain or how that affected the environment or the worker. We need to take responsibility already before the consumers.
And another note on this is also, of course, that many products that come early in sustainability with sustainability label on it are also mostly priced higher, and costs to implement all of these in this textile system is, of course, important also to address and look at, and often referred to as an obstacle for investing and implementing it for change. So I'm just looking at you now, Patrick, because you are, of course, growing now. You need investments, and you are right on time with this EU regulation and everything for circularity to be implemented. But are the investors standing on your door, like knocking on the door, and the companies accepting your product and just sucking it up on the market? Or I mean,
the short answer, yes.
Good.
Yeah, we have investors knocking on the door. I mean, we even have investors spontaneously coming and seeking wanting to talk to us and see how they can support and so forth. We have some of the largest investors in the world, BlackRock among others, and Capital World and so forth among our shareholder list. And they're of course not investing in Renewcell for 60,000 tons. They're investing in Renewcell for becoming one of the world leaders in sustainable fibers. And as far as we can see right now, we need a lot more competition. We're the only one at scale in the world today. And this technology has been developed at the Royal Institute of Technology, and it's not a coincidence that is happening in Sweden. We are a pulp and paper nation. We have a lot of good scientists in that area. But I also like to come back to a little bit on the previous discussion and on the question of price and quality. We need to support the brands because they are also knocking on the door. We have contact with more than 100, but we cannot support all the brands. We're sold out in the current plant, we're sold out in the plant we're building, and we're close to sold out also for the next expansion that we're doing. There's a massive interest. And the reason is that polyesters, everybody wants to move away from polyester, and to I think it was Caroline's point, also to recycle polyester bottles. I mean, recycled polyester bottle is a perfect system. As soon as you make fibers out of it, you can't recycle it again. And when it comes to cotton, you can recycle it a little bit, but that mechanical recycling is breaking the fibers, and then Levi said it's like the fibers are falling out. So we are currently the only solution, and here we need more competition actually, because we can, as I said earlier, we cannot build all that capacity that is needed. And then we come to the question of price. There's a lot of initiatives out there that want to do new fibers or new threads and new type of textiles and so forth. Getting the acceptance of a new type of textile, that's a massive undertaking. The newest fiber that came along was lyocell. It's still a very, very small fiber. I mean, you need to explain that to designers, to consumers, and how it colors, how it decolors, how it smells after sweating, and how it washes, and God knows. And that takes a long time. So I think what we need to do is to use the systems that we have. And the other point is price. If you price your product way too high, it would be very difficult. You're creating bottlenecks throughout your value system. We have taken the other way around. We decided to price ourselves in the lower quartile of the pricing spectrum. We're actually pricing our circulose lower than Better Cotton Initiatives and organic cotton today. If you take, let's say, cotton being grown in areas where it's not supposed to be grown and with a lot of water and so forth, it's selling for about $2,000 per ton. We're in the long term, we will be at 2,500 for the fibers. So a pair of jeans, it might be a cost increase of $0.50, $2, maybe $2 or so. It's nothing in the long run. And if you look at then the launches that we have made, there is a consumer interest in eating sustainably, but also clothing yourself sustainably. So these Levi's jeans that I have on today, they sold for about $140 US. Normally a pair of Levi's, give or take a few, depending on where you are, $1,100, $1,200. So it's a little bit of a price premium there for Levi's, which is fantastic. I cherish that they actually earn a little more because they don't want to launch more with us. So we're trying, and that is a little bit of the upside, the world upside down. We have a scarcity, but we choose not to squeeze the value chain. And that is because we want everybody to feel there is a solution, and Renewcell will build as long as you make the commitments. So, I mean, we're trying to avoid creating bottlenecks throughout the value chain, because this is so important. We have to do it now, 10 years. And
So becoming the Elon Musk of recycling textiles.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but why not? I know it's a bit pretentious to say that. I mean, what he's done with, but if you look at it, look at Tesla, what they did. Tesla has inspired the whole automotive industry to go towards electrification. We're hoping that Renewcell can actually inspire the whole fashion industry and material manufacturing to go towards circular solutions. I know it's pretentious, but at least let's try.
Yeah, good thinking here. All right, so moving over to Martin again. So, what do you see as what sort of companies, entrepreneurs, technologies that now are needed to shift the industry to more sustainable practices?
Yeah, but I think, yeah. Oh, sorry.
What would you
Yeah, but I think Patrick had a good point about Renewcell needing some competition. Because if you look at kind of the current global market of textile fibers, the individual sources and the materials, we have a big portion coming from polyester and cotton and man-made cellulosics, but we also have a long tail of other materials that are still big uses and so on. But then, I mean, we are trying to look at kind of the full value chain, going from raw material to then what happens with the garments once they are worn, looking at both kind of new business models towards the consumers, exploring track and trace, blockchain based traceability systems, but also focusing really on kind of fibers, recycling and also other types of production technologies. So we are, for example, investing in companies developing new systems for dyeing the textiles. Instead of using a lot of water, they're using jet streams to kind of print on top of the fibers and penetrating the fibers with jet streams, and then you save a lot of water and energy in that process. So we are trying to kind of look at the full value chain and explore and find new solutions that can kind of move the industry. So we are not necessarily kind of focusing on a too narrow scope, but rather trying to have a holistic view on kind of the full supply chain. And there are a lot of innovators out there coming up with new technologies, and we are seeing them. Hopefully we will see even more in the future. And also want to stress that I mean, I've been working for H&M Cola for about 4 years, and I think we are starting to see, I mean, more and more investors kind of being eager to enter the space. I mean, the investors into these funds and other investment vehicles are becoming a bit more patient towards kind of somewhat longer cycles and some of these solutions kind of being more capital intense, but the long-term potential is huge. So I think we're starting to see more and more both kind of venture capital funds, but also family offices, angel investors, and private investors engaging more and more in this space, and that creates a lot of positive momentum for these startups and scale ups and enable them to grow faster. So I think that it's great, kind of that shift that we've seen in the past years.
Fantastic. Now we just have a minute to wrap up, and I want the four of you to answer in like one word now. I made this a challenge. So if you could point to one thing without any explanation from your perspective that you feel is missing to make fashion sustainable, what would it be? One word, if you can. Molly.
Systemic view.
Circularity.
Martin.
Nice.
That's 2 words, but coming together.
Caroline.
I would say regulation.
Fantastic. A variation of what we really probably need a lot of. And thank you, audience. And sorry to not bringing in all of your questions. And I would like to, if we can save them. And I would, if possible, try to get back to you. I don't know how, but possibly. I think it's fantastic with the engagement that you have shown also. And thank you, the panel. Fantastic people. Applause to you. And also Maria, who's been here behind the scenes, working with the technology and everything to also let you in on your questions. So audience, great thank you. And hope to see you again. SSE alumni have several of these webinars now and then. So keep your eyes open and sign up to get news on this. Great, thank you, bye.